Hello, I'm Tokes Hussain, and I'm going to be the presenter for this film. In this film, we're going to discover the story of BNLF from its origins, and of course, we're going to encounter individual stories which we hope will inspire you in this profession of law. So, stay tuned with me and enjoy the ride in this 21st anniversary film. I am a barrister and international lawyer. I joined the BNLF in 2018. Since then, I've headed the BNLF Junior Lawyers Division, and in 2019, I won the BNLF Rising Star in Law Award, which was a very proud moment. So that's my story. In this film, we'll be telling the BNLF story in 3 parts: the foundations, broader themes, and individual stories. In the first part, we'll learn the origins of the BNLF and its evolution over 21 years in an ever-changing world. For the broader themes, we'll see what role BNLF has played in issues that impact communities, such as knife crime and the future of the legal profession. Finally, in the individual stories, we'll spotlight some individuals, BNLF members who have made significant contributions over the years. So, brace yourselves for the BNLF story. The story begins early into the new millennium. The winds of optimism blew as the world looked forward to the 2000s. In the UK, Prime Minister Tony Blair was at the helm of affairs, and over in Nigeria, so was President Olusegun Obasanjo. In May 2001, a coalition of leading lawyers from the UK and Nigeria attended a conference hosted by the British Council. The delegates of the first African Law Week conference in Abuja included Baroness Helena Kennedy KC, Chair of the British Council, Roy Amlett KC, Chair of the Bar Council, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, SAN, the current Vice President of Nigeria, and Professor Oba Nsube KC, SAN.
The agenda for the conference, we covered topics such as access to justice, human rights, corruption, and intergovernmental cooperation, all of those sorts of things that lawyers are engaged with, important for us at that time to consider, to reflect, and to come up with ideas as to how we would face some of the challenges of that day.
Little did these lawyers know, but just 4 months after the conference, the world as we knew it would so fundamentally change.
What came down though? What came down?
We crashed. The other trade center's down. It's down. It's down.
9/11 happened. This tragedy ushered in an era of heightened frenzy. The need for solidarity and bilateral relations became clearer.
It was very, very clear that we had to act collectively. Obviously, sometimes it's much quicker to go individually, but if you want to sustain, if you want to endure, if you want to impact, you go collectively. And so the need for an organization, a well-run organization of Nigerian lawyers that were bilateral in nature, connecting with the UK was obvious. It wasn't an easy thing to found, although the idea was obvious, because at that time the Society of Nigerian Lawyers saw themselves very much as playing that role. But I remember very clearly that there were differences in that organization. There were aspirational, political aspirations in that organization, and there was quite a bit of infighting. And so, of course, these things can be solved, but it just seemed easier to start again, and that's what we did. The origin of the British Nigeria Law Forum, we really started with a blank piece of paper in the basement of the Law Society that actually hosted us for a number of years, allowed us to meet free of charge. And for us, that was a very, very important platform because it gave us a convening space, a time to discuss, to talk, and to move to action. So that's literally we got going. From there, we had to set up a secretariat. We had the help of Tim Daniel and his law firm, Essential Assistance. He acted as essentially as our treasurer. So the money was important. I became chair, and we started to grow from there.
As chair of the BNLF, Oba's objective was simple, but certainly not easy: to transform this nascent organization into a world-class one. So, let's head over and meet Oba's very first recruit.
The British Nigerian Law Forum in 2006. At the time, I had been in the UK practicing roughly about just under 10 years. And a few of us from Nigeria felt we needed an organization where we could interact with our colleagues back home, and also an avenue for us to progress our career. So I happened to come across the BNLF when a seminar was being held at the Law Society, which was addressing issues of regulation, and especially regulation of lawyers, solicitors, and barristers who were of Nigerian heritage and had come to practice in the UK. So BNLF, I think, came at the right time for us to be able to meet and form an organization that really addressed the needs of Nigerian lawyers practicing in the UK.
The struggles of the organization, clearly they were primarily resource. These organizations need money. So at the beginning, we were supported, as I said, by the Law Society. Not that they were giving us financial assistance, but they were giving us in-kind assistance. And we also relied upon 2 or 3 core firms that helped us. But the British Nigeria Law Forum very quickly became an independent organization standing on its own 2 feet. And that was purely through subscriptions, memberships, sponsorship ideas, alliances, collaborations. And that organization, for the last 20 years plus, has been an independent, self-resourcing organization. That is a remarkable thing.
In 2007, Babatunde Akinyanju, Babs, became the vice chair of BNLF, and in 2009, he became the second chair of BNLF, a post he held for 6 years.
How to describe that period? I would say a roller coaster. Really, it was a fantastic time because personally I learned a lot. I developed, I believe, as a lawyer and for my own development. But BNLF grew quite substantially, quite time in terms of the membership. We increased our membership, the UK, and also that was really our introduction to the Nigerian market as well.
In 2015, the BNLF had its next chair, criminal barrister Stephen Akintayo. Stephen joined BNLF around 2012. His brother, Jonathan, was the then General Secretary of BNLF.
I would say it was a challenging time in the BNLF's history. I'm not quite sure why we lost our way or the impetus, but it seemed that when the elections for chair came up, there were no front runners. No one had put their name in the ring. And as someone who had dedicated quite a lot of my time to BNLF, I was concerned that the BNLF might even cease to operate as a body, as a group, because without a chair, we were rudderless. And so reluctantly, I agreed, as the only person putting his hat in the ring to become chair in 2015. There were standout moments. I think, as I say, because we were unsure of the direction we were going in, to still be able to put on a number of events, including the gala dinner, a family forum, and of course a breakfast seminar where we looked at asset tracing and recovery, particularly as it pertains to Nigeria, in conjunction with the Law Society with some wonderful speakers. Those were particular highlights. And of course, our involvement in the terms of reference response on behalf of the BNLF, working with the Nigerian Bar Association. Jonathan Akinsanya was asked to prepare a document, and he worked very closely with me and a number of others to prepare that response. And of course, that response was well received, and that is particularly one of the highlights of my tenure.
Speaking of highlights, history was made in BNLF when in 2017, Shea Aina became the first woman chair of BNLF.
My mission statement was to have special interest groups, which I did form. So I formed the Business Law Network, Family Law Network, Immigration Law Network, Crime Network, and then of course as a woman, we had a Women's Law Network. And then my ambition, which we had always wanted to do, was to have the Junior Lawyers Division. And the Junior Lawyers Division was really a very good step in the history of BNLF. We launched that in Lagos in 2018, and we had the London launch in 2019. And we have a lot of junior lawyers who are actively involved, and it's been a real blessing. And we are even proud that a lot of our junior lawyers have been awarded, not only recognised by BNLF, but also within the legal profession.
Having received the BNLF Rising Star and Law Award myself in 2019, I know the galas and award ceremonies are a beautiful and grand affair. In October 2006, BNLF held its first gala dinner at a venue in North London. But there's a lot that goes behind the scenes.
2006, we decided to have a gala dinner as a means of raising funds, but also to celebrate our achievements and just to have fun. So our first gala dinner was at the Irish Centre in Camden, North London. It does remain in my mind because it was the first major event I organized, and that took quite some doing. But was a very successful event. It's great fun. In fact, we had a guest entertainer, none other than Gina Yashere.
During the gala dinner, there are times when things go absolutely right and things don't quite go right. Now, George Tomi had come all the way from Lagos. He had a group of people with him, and the awards were delivered to the hotel. And I got there and I said, okay, bring all the awards out. Looking at all the awards, and I don't find the awards for George Tomi, and I'm thinking, what? This man has come all the way from Nigeria and we can't find his award. It's not going to be funny. So I said, listen, whatever you do, we're going to clear this room now. Even if you have to minesweep it, we must find that award. So, and I came out, saw George. Oh, hi, George, how are you doing? I was thinking, back in the room, have you found it? No. Well, you've got to clear this room, we've got to find it. We did find it in the end. It was tucked away in their post, right behind some boxes. And I said, you are very fortunate today because, I don't care what would have happened, this man was going to get an award. So, things like that happen. But luckily, all our events have gone according to plan, but we've had some, little kind of hairy moments. but we've got through it on the whole very well.
2019 was a memorable year, not just for the BNLF, but for the entire world. COVID-19, a global pandemic, was a serious threat to humanity. But COVID-19 also presented serious opportunities for us to redefine how to do law and business. Dr. Jennifer Obaseki, a solicitor, became BNLF chair in the virtual era. She first became involved with BNLF around 2008, after facing Oba in court. She was vice chair during Shea's tenure.
So once I assumed the position of chair, when this chair I now stepped down, we really saw the organisation have to change. This was due to the fact that we, from March 2020, entered the situation with COVID and pandemic. And it was important for me during that period of time, not only to support members, but let them really know how best BNLF might be able to offer them some insight as to how to manage. So despite the pandemic, we were able to hold a number of events. Strategically, we started to push our promotion online. We realized that we had to really get a handle of our footprint on social media. And we then also saw the divisions equally become a lot more supportive to their members. So within BNLF, you have a number of divisions. You have the junior lawyers division, you have the women's, commercial, immigration, and again, family. So within these teams, as it were, there was a lot of activity within the groups, sharing of information, and we saw that to be exceedingly beneficial to our members.
So how do the chairs feel after 21 years?
After 21 years of BNLF, I'm honoured to say that I was a part of its history and its development and its survival. And I really think back to the early days and what we were trying to achieve, the number of things that we did achieve, the number of young lawyers that we assisted, the number of conferences that we put on, the gala dinners, and we remained relevant. And so I'm really, really pleased to be part of that history.
The saying goes that you plant seeds for a tree to grow under which you will not sit, or you may not sit for long. And that is exactly what has happened. We planted seeds for a tree to grow under which other people are sitting, and that's important.
The BNLF has always sought to be more than just a membership group. We always had in mind that we have to make a difference in our communities. To that end, BNLF has several interest groups, ranging from the women's group, criminal law group, family law, immigration, etc. Shortly, you're going to see a roundtable discussion. We're going to talk about knife crime. It is a sad reality, but one which we believe we can make a difference in this great country. So stay tuned, and I hope you find this session enlightening. Thank you.
Every 14 minutes, there's a knife crime across England and Wales.
What that guy was like? Yeah.
This week, we investigate the knives on our streets.
Who knows what that has been used for?
This is why, look.
We witness the tension
Yeah, look.
as police search for a solution.
My friend is dead, yeah, and this is what we're doing to support him, yeah, and look what they're doing. Look.
There's been a lot of knife crime. I've had 3 murders in the last couple of weeks.
So how many people rob you?
And the victims in fear.
I think one of the things that has happened is life is so much different from when we were young. And the context and the way in which we live is different because of that. And I think a large part of it is not just about having the internet, but also the breakdown and the dissolution of family life across all communities because of the way that we live and the fast pace and the economic needs that are brought to bear in the way that we live. And I think all of those challenges have become mitigating factors in how we understand the context around young people.
Firstly, I'd like to emphasise what Donna has said in relation to the issues affecting society, full stop, and maybe address, which may or may not be an elephant in the room, at the fact that this is a societal issue as opposed to any particular race or that type, because there are issues across the country, irrespective of the metropolitan area that you may live in, where predominantly knife crime prevails, or street violence, young people violence, which affects every demographic.
Anthony Graham explains the vital role that lawyers play in combating knife crime.
Our hands are tied, right? Particularly in respect of potential sentencing. You know, sentencing guidelines govern the sentences that are handed down by the courts. So we're duty bound to advise and assist and explain what's involved in terms of potential sentencing. And there are processes in terms of how we run legal arguments and how we can explain the law of joint enterprise as an example, right? How we explain that. We go above and beyond and extend our pastoral responsibilities, because I think it's innate within us that we must do. So the importance of explaining the system to as many people as possible cannot be overstated, and also goes hand in hand with what Donna's saying about her knowledge, about when she's digging deeper, when you're digging deeper and understanding how it is that we're here and the support that is needed for families at large. You know, so it's a multi-agency approach, if I can put it that way, because we're only on one side. I'm on one side as a criminal defence practitioner, and those who are in the community working are on the other side.
When we read the newspaper headlines, I wonder how many times we think of the families affected. Donna Murray Turner certainly does, and has worked closely with mothers for years. As a mother herself, she understands their pain.
It's like watching the innards of something being ripped out, as graphic as that. And with it, that sense of, you know, to be a parent is the most judged role, I feel, in the world. And yet it comes with no handbook. Nobody says, here's your brand new baby, and this is what you need to do to make this, turn this baby into a successful, contributing member of wider society. Nobody gives you that handbook. And for so many of the families, it's a feeling of failure. You know, how did my child, especially if they're it's the family of the perpetrator, how do we get to this? Where did we go wrong? And the families of the victims, why? Where is my child? Why would this happen to my child? You know, and it's very overwhelming. I mean, I'll talk from my position because it's very overwhelming. Stephen, often, and I have 3 teenagers myself, I am at home and I cry. And I cry not for my own home situation, but for the overwhelming feeling of loss, especially most recently. A mother who it was her only son. Her only son.
So what are some of the possible solutions?
But for me, 2022 is all about leadership and the interrupting of pathways and looking at alternatives. So for me, that's kind of like where it is. It's about looking at things differently, as you said. Yeah, we've got the same, you know, we've got the same chessboard, same pieces, but how do we play the game differently? And how do we invoke that necessary leadership that sits alongside statutory, but has that grassroots intelligence, know where it's at, and be allowed to apply it where it is?
What I will say as a final note, I do think that there is a place for big business to play a role. Be what's known as a vanguard company, right? Be on the ascendancy where you can come into communities and say, well, actually, do you know what? We do make millions out of certain communities. It's time that we actually give something constructive back as opposed to giving back a phone or a pair of trainers or something like that. There's a place for them as well, and show government how it can be done too.
In October 2020, Nigeria celebrated its 60th Independence Day anniversary. More than 30 years after serving as Nigeria's military head of state, Muhammadu Buhari was back as the president of Nigeria.
From the bass drum you heard a while ago signifies the commencement of the color patrol. Like I did mention earlier, the color patrol
These mostly young Nigerians were protesting against police brutality, corruption, and human rights abuses. The movement is called End SARS, in reference to the call to disband the infamous police unit known as the Special Anti-Robbery Squad, SARS. In response to the End SARS movement, the British Nigeria Law Forum, Junior Lawyers Division, BNLF JLD, then headed by myself and Olalade Sharami, the current chair of BNLF, organized a virtual constitutional law and human rights training for all Nigerians and allies. 2021 was a highly consequential year for climate litigation. In a historic ruling against the oil giant Shell, a Netherlands court found in favor of 4 Nigerian farmers, along with environmental activists, in an oil spill case that was first filed in 2008. And in the UK, the Supreme Court in Okapi and Shell ruled that Royal Dutch Shell was legally responsible for the systemic pollution of the Ogale and Bile communities, and that their case could proceed in the English courts. BNLF, as well as the BNLF JLD, have spread awareness of climate justice. The BNLF JLD has successfully designed and implemented many initiatives to build the capacity of young lawyers and spread awareness of important human rights matters. We've partnered with notable organizations such as the Solicitors Regulation Authority in delivering anti-bullying and harassment training. I caught up with my old team and my successors, Moji and Afalari, at Stevenson Harwood, one of BNLF's partner firms. We reflected on our tenure and hopes for the future.
So Stevenson Harwood does a lot of work, I think has done a lot of work for quite a few years now with the BNLF, with Kamal Shah, Julian Shokon, and various other people who I think know some of the people who traditionally work quite high up in the organisation. And when I was a trainee here, I think at some point in 2019, there was the International Women's Day event, and it was hosted here, and one of the partners, Stevenson Harwood, Sue Miller, was speaking. I think a couple of other people were speaking, someone from Nigeria and various others. And it was a great experience. It was just something that I kind of tagged along to as a business development event. Kamal told me that there might be some people there that would be good for you to know, some barristers, some lawyers from Nigeria, some potential clients as well. And ever since then, I just kind of kept in touch. What's your story, Roger?
It's the same. This is the first time I'm hearing this. It's the same as me, you know.
You're also a trainee here at this
No, of course not. But no. So my lecturer, my former lecturer when I was in uni, she's Nigerian, so she told me about BNLF, and she was like, oh, there's this international women's thing going on here. And I was like, I was in Birmingham, so I was like, okay, I'll, travel down and attend the event. I think I was the youngest here, because I was still in my second year of uni, and there was just older women, and and I was like, oh my god, this is so cool. So it felt nice to be the youngest, and so many people felt the need to talk to me and advise me. It was a bit overwhelming, but it was so nice to just hear from people that were where I wanted to be at that time. I mean, I still want to be, I'm still getting there, but it was really nice to talk to all these women that were part of BNLF, and I was able to ask all the questions because I had so many questions on training contract, on being an international student in the UK, trying to be a qualified solicitor.
So, Dara, you also want to become a prosecutor and work in CPS. When you think about the legal industry, do you have any anxieties at the moment? And at the same time, what are your hopes for when you eventually go into practice?
I don't have any anxieties at all.
Yeah.
Maybe because I'm so passionate about it, I've been dreaming about about being a prosecutor. That for me, I am like a horse with blinkers. If I just see one thing into one direction, I'm not even looking here and there. That, oh, if I don't get it, I'm going to try that. What if I don't get that? I don't have this. I know I have to be a prosecutor, and I'm going to do everything, learn new skills, or go more into courtrooms and, learn from people. I am prepared to do that because that is something I want so badly. Not someone else picking it for me, not someone else telling me what to do. That is something I want. So I don't have any anxieties. In fact, I have excitement.
I know there will be a lot of changes. So if things happen this way, you have to try and adapt. So I'm really open in the future. I'm really open towards the options that are open before me. But I know law is really huge, it's wide. Things are changing. So it's always good to be open to change.
On 23rd September 2022, Barrister Lolade became the youngest chair of the BNLF. He was recently a Pegasus Scholar, where he undertook a 2-month secondment at Aluko and Oyebode in Lagos, Nigeria.
Having won a Pegasus Scholarship in 2020, that's an international outgoing Pegasus Scholarship from the Pegasus Scholarship Trust. I was seconded between April and June 2022 to a leading law firm in the cultural and economic melting pot that is Lagos. And during that time, I met and networked with many budding, energetic, and passionate junior lawyers from a wide array of law firms and chambers in Nigeria. There was a theme in my conversations with most of them. Many had decided to pivot themselves away from practicing in Nigeria and moving elsewhere, mostly to the United Kingdom and the United States. I see it as the responsibility of all stakeholders to work together to find meaningful solutions to these issues if Nigeria's legal market is to remain competitive. Indeed, if any legal market, if any legal system is to remain effective, fit for purpose, and competitive, its stakeholders must, amongst other things, seek to improve the features of their systems that make their legal profession unattractive in the long term for junior lawyers. Examples of the way this issue manifests itself in Britain include the significant under-remuneration of junior lawyers in publicly funded areas of work as compared to their colleagues working in privately funded areas. Also, the underrepresentation of ethnic minorities, including Nigerians, in the more lucrative areas of work, and their overrepresentation in publicly funded areas of work. As for what I see for the future of junior lawyers, I see a really bright future. One that is characterized by closer integration with technology and new ways of working, new career structures and outlooks.
Next, we speak to Olakunle Akintunde, a cybersecurity expert at the Home Office. He shared some insights regarding the role of technology in the future of the legal profession.
So evolution of technology is quite interesting because technology has been pivotal to the improvements of the legal system and artificial intelligence has been one of the forefront innovation improvements of the legal system, which is backed by the fourth industrial revolution. We have had 4 industrial revolutions and we are in the 4th industrial revolution, which is thoroughly backed by artificial intelligence and machine learning. The technology that we have today is one, digitalization of the case laws, and one great example was at the Harvard School Library, whereby they digitalized 334 history years of law, and that was digitalized successfully. So one of the questions that's bothered my mind, basically, which I'd like to throw back to the audience, is that will artificial intelligence replace lawyers? And we have seen a situation whereby in the medical industry, whereby we have robots that are doing similar care system that the medical profession prefer. I think in the nearest future, we're going to have similar. The only gap that I've identified as a cybersecurity expert is the gap whereby artificial intelligence is still yet to understand human interaction. So for example, if you wink at someone and while the court law or case is going on, that is something that artificial intelligence is not able to decipher at the moment. But in the near future, we have a predictive coding software that is here with us right now. So predictive coding software can actually predict human interaction and can quickly and in microseconds, understands and put that into readable format for humans. So that's one of the improvements that we have seen. But again, whether artificial intelligence will replace lawyers is a big question in my head.
Over the past 21 years, lawyers of color have made significant contributions to the law and society, particularly in Britain. We'll start off with Anesta Weeks KC, a prominent criminal barrister who was memorably the counsel in the Stephen Lawrence inquiry. We caught up with her at the 20th anniversary gala dinner and award ceremony, where she received the BNLF Lawyer of the Year award.
Winning this award for the British Nigerian Law Forum is, to date, the best award I've ever won, and there are two reasons for it. I know quite a lot about this organisation, and I've worked with a number of their members on various projects and seminars. They are a serious organisation. They have been run very well for 20 years, and they cross the divide of commercial, civil, white and black companies. So getting this award is very prestigious for me. The journey of black lawyers has been time-consuming, often a struggle, but it has always developed from better than it was the year before. And I say that because I was one of the first few black women who became silks. There were very few women at all on the High Court bench when I came to the bar in 1981. My work has changed in the sense that pretty much all the black lawyers I knew did criminal work. And I started to do employment work. I sat as an employment law judge, and that's a really important, serious civil area that includes almost everybody in this country, because you're either in work or out of it, and you want a job, or you are an employer or an employee. So I have watched black lawyers become commercial lawyers. They've increased in the numbers who work in good law firms. They're still the minority, but when I came, there were none at all. And then, of course, we increased our number of silks. And in a sense, criminal work, it tends to be more high profile because of the type of work it is. You're on television. I mean, I've done 5 TV programs and about 4 radio programs. So I don't regret doing crime. I enjoy it. I'm very good at it.
The face of an 18-year-old boy murdered at a London bus stop, but Stephen Lawrence came to symbolise the failings and racism of the Metropolitan Police.
Stephen Lawrence was a bright, young, prospective, handsome, young teenager. And Newham is an area in South London which has always had some difficulties in relation to black and whites, and it's borderline slightly, some people will say, there are racist elements within that area. One night, Stephen was coming home. He angered no one. He did nothing to anyone. He was chased by 5 white suspects and killed. As simple as that. Our inquiry, after a huge amount of effort by both his parents, Doreen Lawrence, who is now in the House of Lords, as you know, his father is, I think, out of the country, but they were both equally adamant that they wanted some form of justice for their son. It was one of the first modern-day examples of parents who wouldn't give up, and they didn't give up. And finally, they got the inquiry, and I was junior counsel on that inquiry.
Nesta understood the significance of the inquiry. After all, Stephen's murder was a decisive and divisive moment concerning Britain's race relations.
I was on the inquiry side, which was the neutral side. I prepared that 8 hours a day. I decided that I would write a complete chronology of everything that happened, from the date that Stephen was known to have died and to the date that there were some interviews. The Nation of Islam were a group of individuals which you may have heard of, and they came to the inquiry but raised a complaint against a white member of my inquiry team. And they complained that we were a racist inquiry because, first of all, we hadn't given them sufficient tickets, and subtly they didn't like the way I dressed. My skirt was at the knee, not long enough, and I wore lipstick. This sounds rather petty, but it brings in one of the members of our panel, who was then the Bishop of Stepney, who then later became the Archbishop of York. The Archbishop of York, Semtanu, a wonderful man. I was angry because I didn't like any member of my team being called a racist, and it included me. And I thought about it for a while, and I wondered why they said that. I went and reported it to the Archbishop, and I said, well, I'm furious about it. And he sat and he said, well, if you are talking to the Nation of Islam, have you looked at yourself this morning? I said, Bishop, this is no time for jokes. I have looked at myself. Well, he was very politely but slightly jokingly, because he wanted to get my mood up, he said, well, they may not approve of the way you dress. And I said, well, would they prefer you? And actually, as soon as I said it, I knew I was right. Calm was then deposited on the entirety of this group, who just ate every word that the Archbishop said. He's an Archbishop. So, yes, I was very concerned about being called a racist, and black people don't like it. Sometimes white people don't like us calling them racist. Suddenly, the things were turned on me. For the first time in my life, I was told I was being racist, and I did go home and think about it. And I thought about the attitude that the inquiry had to the white lawyers who were representing those that were said to have killed Stephen Lawrence. Because of course my mind was against them, but I had to run a fair inquiry. I was a lawyer. I wasn't an emotional black woman wanting to put things right. So I learned huge lessons, even as an experienced lawyer, through that inquiry. It is extraordinary how the most important piece of work I have ever done in my life has never gone away for the last 25 years. As you know, 2 of them were convicted. Back came the inquiry with issues of corruption. I was then invited to Northern Ireland to give evidence and to take the whole of my papers. I can say this now because that part of it is no longer confidential, because they wanted to look at every single note I ever made. They were looking for corruption, because that was never settled. Finally, it's the only public inquiry in my lifetime that changed an Act of Parliament. Every single local authority up and down this country must now, whenever they're changing their internal procedures, when an act comes in, when a new process comes in, you need to make sure that it is even and there is equality about the manner in which you will use that for all types of people, whatever their race. So a huge learning curve for me. And I was called a racist.
We turn now to another recipient of the BNLF Lawyer of the Year award, Barrister Ifeanyi Odogu, who is a leading practitioner in sports law.
So winning Lawyer of the Year in 2019 was a huge honour. It represented a full circle moment for me, coming to the British Nigeria Law Forum as a student initially, and then ultimately winning Lawyer of the Year. Was a huge journey and a lot of highs and a lot of lows in between. But it does represent to me a moment of achievement, a moment of fulfillment, but also just recognition and a subtle reminder to pay it forward and make sure the generation coming behind me can replicate my footsteps. So looking back on my journey, I can't say that I always wanted to be a lawyer. I sort of fell into it, like many lawyers do. Gentle nudges from the parents to study law, read. But as I got into it, I developed a passion and really a motivation to help people, help vulnerable people, and be their voice. And law is a natural fit for those who are seeking to improve the lives of others. And that's what I've done. So a moment of exceptional pride for me is right at the beginning of my journey, being called to the bar of Middle Temple under a scholarship. It was a huge, huge moment for my family. We filled the temple with my cousins, my aunts, my uncles, my parents and my siblings. The first one in my family to be a barrister. And it just represented the investment that my parents had made into me, and to see them see me bring that to fruition meant a lot, and that was the beginning of my journey.
Turning now from a sports lawyer to a sports star turned lawyer, let's catch up with Christine Ohurugu, former Team GB Olympic, World and Commonwealth athletic champion.
First time at the Olympics, that's going back a few years. So that would have been, that's 2004 in Athens. And for me, that was a real baptism of fire, because that was my first foray into championships. I'd never been to a championship before that, not one of that magnitude, not even a world champs. And I've only just turned, not professional, but I'd only just entered the elite ranks in athletics. And I was racing against people who were very, very quick. I'd not been used to that standard of running. So it was very daunting, but I don't remember it being daunting. I remember speaking to a psychologist who I still talk to this day. And he said to me, I told him, at the time I didn't have my coach. My coach, I wasn't elite enough, so my coach wasn't able to turn up. So I was pretty much on my own. And I was really, really worried. And he said to me, look, Christine, all you have to do is do what you do ordinarily, but on an extraordinary day. And he said, just pretend you're at Mile End. It's the same track. Mile End is where I trained. And he said, just pretend that you're at Mile End, the same 8 lanes, the same 400 meters round. Just do exactly what you do at Mile End, but do it here. You only have a few more people that are going to be watching you. And that worked brilliantly. I remember that thinking, it's just the same track, and it's that what I think has gotten me through every other championship, thinking that it's no different from what I do already. If I can do it in cold, rainy London, then I can do it anywhere else. So when I went to Beijing 4 years later, I knew that this was, I'm here to win a medal. This is not just here to say I went to the games and I've got my kit. This is actually a time for me to come home with what I think I deserve. I process things very, very deeply. So the fact that I can go off and do something means I've had a look at it and I'm good to go, So that's kind of how it started with law. Law was never something that was in my plan of things to do. It really wasn't. I don't know, I thought I was going to retire and
go and sit on a beach somewhere, go and chill. I didn't plan to come and do a degree. The degree almost killed me. It was so hard, and then, it was really difficult. So it's not really what I had in mind. It really was not what I had in mind. But I just like the idea of the challenge. I think there's a theme. You've probably seen a theme in how I operate and how I do things. So that was the first step in kind of getting me to get the degree done and to look towards which areas of law I can go into. And I think that I'm seeing it as a real journey. I think it's not something I've got a very, very clear picture of just yet. But I've really enjoyed my journey so far. I've enjoyed the people I've met, the events I've been able to go to, like, the masked gala that where I met today. So I've really enjoyed the journey so far, and I really do think that it's not so much a question of where I'm going to go, where I'm going to end up. I really think we focus maybe too much time on that. And I say this because as an athlete, yes, it's great winning gold, it's great being on the podium, but the most joy you get is getting there. It's the small wins you pick up along the way. It's learning that I was able to do that even though I thought I couldn't do it. I was able to go out and train in the cold and rain, even though I was feeling really horrible and I had a really late night and I didn't sleep very well and I'm injured. It was all those small wins where you really learn about yourself and you build a real kind of, you build a substantial picture of yourself. I think sometimes the winning is great, obviously, but it's also those small steps you get along the way.
In this next interview, we go to the office of Segun Osuntokun, a commercial solicitor specialising in dispute resolution work and the UK managing partner of Bryan Cave Leighton Paisner. Segun's been an active member and supporter of BNLF since its inception.
I was born in Ibadan, Nigeria, and I spent my teenage years, early teens, in Ibadan going to international school. And after my O-levels, as they then were in those days, I came over to England to do my A-levels. After my A-levels, I stayed on to go to university at Queen Mary, London, where I read economics. After a year out, when I went back to Nigeria to do my NYSC, I returned to England to do a law degree at Balliol College, Oxford. And after that, I started to work in the city. I trained as a solicitor at a firm called Wild Sapt, which is now part of Denton's. And in 1999, I moved to DLA Piper, which is another international law firm, where I was made partner in 2003. And in 2008, I moved to BCLP. That's 14 years ago, where I've been ever since. My choice of law after economics was driven really by a little bit of parental prodding. Both of my parents were medical doctors, and they, I suppose, typically wanted their children to, have a profession. So for them, economics wasn't really was a nice subject to study, but wasn't really a profession, hence the law. I had an older sister who was also a lawyer, so I had some insight into what the practice of law was about. The Nigerian related cases I have worked on have included acting for the Nigerian government against the estate of the late General Abacha. I have acted for a number of Nigerian financial institutions, including the Central Bank of Nigeria, and also African financial institutions such as the African Development Bank. My connection with the BNLF is that I was there at the start, at its inception, with the likes of Professor Oba Nsugbe QC, and in those early days, with the support of the Law Society and other practitioners in the City of London, we really did galvanize the Nigerian legal community in diaspora to work for better understanding and collaboration between the profession in the UK and the profession in Nigeria. I focused on, in those those years was the effort to establish a form of reciprocal understanding between the legal education authorities in Nigeria and the practicing community in the UK to see whether we could come up with a means by which the experience, those of us in the diaspora of Nigerian heritage, the experience we had garnered in legal practice, whether that could aid or count towards relevant qualification experience in Nigeria.
2008 was also a highly consequential year in global affairs. The world witnessed the election of Barack Obama, the first African-American president of the USA. But the world also witnessed the global financial crisis around that time. As a commercial solicitor, Segun more than anyone understood how this crisis impacted the law.
The great financial crash of 2008, which really did see the world upended and I think set in motion unforeseeable events leading to the changing of the guard in not just in socioeconomic terms, but also in terms of the financial infrastructure. I mean, it's easy for those who didn't live through it. It's easy to underestimate the impact it had for clients, for the financial services sector in particular. It was seen as a failure of regulation in many regards, and the swing of the pendulum the other way in terms of financial regulatory oversight has been significant. In terms of my own practice as a commercial solicitor, commercial disputes solicitor, it had wide-ranging ramifications. The near collapse of the global financial services system sparked many banking and financial services disputes. And those disputes were not just limited to the developed economies, they also affected the developing economy. One memorable case I was involved in sprung out of the impact of the great financial crash on the Nigerian banking system and the Nigerian Stock Exchange, because the case I'm talking about involved the revelation after the Nigerian stock market crashed that one of its banks had in fact been engaged in a scheme whereby it was propping up its share price on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, pumping up, well, not just propping up, but pumping up its share price on the Nigerian Stock Exchange through a series of unlawful loans made to connected parties. And so when the market crashed as a result of the backwash from the great financial crash, that bank was in a perilous state. And I and a team represented the bank in seeking to recover damages from the person who was responsible for that scheme. So for me, it was a formative event. As I say, its ripples continue down the ages, and the current architecture of the world financially owes a lot to that time.
Finally, let's go back to the inner temple and learn more about the man who started it all, Oba Nsugbe.
People have gone before us, people will come after us, and the time you have, you've got to use very usefully. Yes. You've got to use it, you've got to really use it.
Carpe diem.
Yep.
So it's very interesting having this sense of history, and I'm personally rather interested in your history as to how you became involved in this noble profession. So I know your father was a very important part of your journey.
My father was an important part of my journey. Yeah. In fact, my father was a university professor.
Yeah.
He was a professor at Nsukka University. Before that, he taught in various places, including Lusaka.
Okay.
And he was also at the British Museum, talking about African artifacts. That's a specialist area, history of African man. My father cared about education, as all Nigerian fathers and mothers do.
Yes.
It's all about education. And I did not care about education. I cared about other things. So when I was like 17, he caught me sneaking past in a parlor in Nigeria, sat me down and said, listen, can you tell me what you want to do in your life? It was a big question. And I started going on about, I'm ready to play football, I'm quick, I'm skillful, all that stuff, Maradona. And every Nigerian plays football, or thinks they can play football. And he listened for about 2-3 minutes, and he just said, you'll do law. And that was it. And that was I, of course, tried to fight back, insofar as you're allowed to. I questioned the rationale of law. Why did he think I should be doing law? And he said that he'd been reading my old school reports, which didn't make good reading, and a report that he read when I was aged 13. One of my schoolmasters at school said that this young man will be a lawyer, should be a lawyer. And my father hung on to this rash statement. And so when your dad at that stage tells you you're doing law, you do law, right? Even though you pretend that you're dissenting, but you're not dissenting. And I think that, now I think back, your parents, they know what they're talking about, right? And he saw what I should be doing, and he saw why I should be doing it. And I think he was right.
What has the journey been like for you? Obviously now you are QC, you're head of the chambers, which is quite close here actually. And you're a SAN as well, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, and you're a judge. So it's a quite extraordinary journey. How has it been for you?
Well, it feels like it's been a short journey, although it hasn't. And it feels like things have happened quickly, although they haven't. So it's been a journey in which you don't really realize that you're achieving certain milestones at the time because you've got your head down. But the way in which I've approached this journey is I've taken it literally day by day. So I take a case and I approach it as if it's my last case. It's the last case I'm ever going to do. And I approach it as if the client I'm representing, whether it be corporate or individual, is the last client that's going to instruct me. The journey has also been about appreciating the fact that you are a Nigerian. Now, I know that sounds, in a way, it sounds opaque, but what I appreciate about being a Nigerian is that we are a people that are well educated, we're resilient, we have a little bit of mischief about us in a kind of, I'd say in a kind of friendly, kind way, Some would call it swagger, some would call it pride, some would call it beating our chests.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to call it, as long as we do it in moderation and with respect for other people, but Nigerians hold their heads up.
Yeah.
So I have always been very, very aware.
Yeah. And you know a Nigerian where
you know a Nigerian. You know a Nigerian. Of course, we have our faults because sometimes we do it in excess, and sometimes we do it to the exclusion of other Africans, which is a fair criticism. But at the same time, Nigerians represent. We represent. I mean, you cannot go somewhere and a Nigerian will be sitting there shy somewhere. I mean, I remember the story of the Commonwealth Leaders Conference in Scotland. I think it was in Gleneagles. And they were all positioning themselves for an official photo. And you had, the heads of governments, heads of states. And of course, General Obasanjo, he'd been put at the back. He pushed and stood at the front.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, yes. He was in the middle of the group. And that's what we do, you know. It's fine doing that as long as you don't mess up. Once you get there, you cannot afford to mess up. When you get to this position, if you don't use your position to help other people and to pass on things, then you haven't you failed.
Yes.
It's as simple as that. You failed. You can forget it. It's not a personal achievement.
Hooray! We've reached the end. Well, you now know the story of BNLF. You know the struggles, you know the successes, you even know individual stories, and of course, exciting gossip. I hope you found this very inspiring. Of course, there are big questions to ask ourselves. In particular, what will be the future of the legal profession? I'm an optimist, and I like to believe that the future is in good hands. Well, for tonight, I don't wish to ponder too much on these questions. I'm going to go back to the party. Once again, it's Tokes the Same, and thanks for watching the film.
Cause my papa no be Dangote, oh Adeleke, but we go day, okay, yeah. I go short for your case, I go slap back bear for your case, I go call MC all homo, I go report all of them, I go short for your case, I go slap back bear for your case, I go call MC all homo, I go report all of them. So tell me, what the hell are you waiting for? If not to chop it on me, you go chop. If not to suck it, gari, you go suck. What the hell are you waiting for? If not to fry a cara, you go fry. If not to suck a kamu, you go suck. For your case, yo, le. For your case, yo, no. For your case, yo.